Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Changing Room Thoughts, the podcast for anyone who has ever had a critical thought about the clothes they wear on their body. I'm Karina, your well-dressed overthinker and host of this podcast, and today's topic, a very hot one, the tariffs, its impact on the fashion industry, and basic knowledge that most people don't know but need to know about what constitutes the clothes that you put on your body. One thing that is really obvious is that, number one, a lot of clothes are made in China. Number two, tariffs are going to radically affect the costs of your clothing, going up quite a bit. And third, people are going to think a little bit harder about whether or not they actually want to buy that next clothing item, especially because it's making an even bigger impact on your wallet than before. I was talking to my boyfriend about this. Something he was asking me was how much the tariffs would impact the price of goods for fashion. Apparel manufacturing is not coming back to the US at the scale that is necessary to really bring costs down. We have not invested in that kind of infrastructure for a very long time. According to CNBC, the US gets about 97% of its clothing and shoes from other countries. And it's estimated that most apparel will be 67% more expensive. On average, a clothing item that is $100 is going to now cost $167 instead. By now, I'm sure you've seen a lot of those videos from Chinese manufacturers that they're cutting out the middlemen, that they're the ones that actually produce and manufacture a lot of the luxury goods, instead buy it directly from the manufacturer. I've gone on TikTok about a rant from one perspective of that argument. I feel like there are a lot of fashion heads that are really defensive over luxury brands and their supply chain and the quality of their goods, and react to these Chinese manufacturers making these videos saying that people are so gullible, these are obviously dupes. And I think the answer is much more nuanced than that. There's a documentary called Luxury Behind the Mirror, and it is an incredible piece of investigative journalism done by British journalists looking into the Made in Italy label for a lot of leather goods, and exposes how there's a lot of sweatshop labor in Italy that profit off of North African migrant workers. The irony, as I'm saying that while wearing a Gucci hat, this was a gift. I think we also just have to recognize, as people who love fashion, that art and design fulfills an emotional desire that is very human and very understandable. You can accept that there is beautiful design in art while also understanding and accepting that the supply chain for a lot of luxury fashion has completely devolved. So while I agree with a lot of fashion creators that people are being very gullible, and by no means is the answer to go and buy up dupes, I do think that we are defending luxury brands a little too hard. Maybe they should just publish their supply chain transparency, but they don't, which is why it's really hard for a lot of people to trust them. Something else I want to point out is that while a luxury brand, take Gucci for example, they may produce their handbags in Italy, their cosmetics, their clothing, plenty of other product categories in their spread of products that they sell you are manufactured and distributed all across the world. Because there's so much lack of transparency in their supply chain, and also because no one bothers to think about a supply chain as complicated as it is, it can be really easy to just say that everything is made in China and therefore everything is bad quality, or everything is made in Italy and therefore everything is good quality, when the reality is that you can have a sweatshop in Italy and a sustainable factory in China. And the same brand can be manufacturing some things in Italy and some things in China and selling it to you, and you think it's all from the same place. And I also don't think that we really need to give them that much grace. I feel like people just forgot about the fact that Christian Dior bags only cost $57 to make. On the flip side of this conversation, I think for some time I had been silent on dupe culture for fear of seeming classist and elitist. I think that's just a stupid argument because no one needs luxury goods. No one needs a luxury bag. You can want a luxury bag, you can buy a luxury bag, but you do not need one to complete your day-to-day functions. And honestly, that can be said about almost everything in fashion. At the end of the day, we only need 5 shirts, 5 pairs of pants, maybe 1 pair of shoes, underwear, socks. But obviously, the entirety of fashion as a concept and a culture is about aesthetics and reinvention and exploring new ideas, new cultures, new people, which fuels a desire to constantly buy new things. Beauty is necessary in one's life, but when it comes specifically to luxury items, by definition, if something is in a luxury category, it was never necessary. It is something you completely bring into your life by choice. You have a choice in the matter. And that's what makes me so frustrated about dupes, because no one needs a dupe. No one needs a designer bag, and much less a stupid fucking dupe. And the other thing that really annoys the fuck out of me, this craze and this rush to buy dupes, is, do you realize everything in your life is about to get more expensive? Your everyday goods, your phones, your cameras, your cars, your furniture. And you're using this time and energy right now to buy dupes? You got your priorities scrambled. There are so many other crazy things that are happening in this country that if you're just slightly paying attention, you would realize that dupes are not worth your time or money. Like, married women in this country who have changed their names may or may not be able to vote in the next election. Let's think about that. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say on this topic. Buy vintage, buy from small designers. It's not that complicated. That's what I think about tariffs from the consumer perspective. But this world of tariffs is also very interesting for me because I'm trying to start a fashion venture of my own. And originally, I had thought that I would source some of my fabric from China. Now, in order to keep my prices affordable, that's not an option. And I was really discouraged for some time. I had thought maybe I should just give up on this idea. I'm trying to develop better sleepwear solutions. Personally, I love nightgowns. I'm always in a nightgown, but I just feel like there are a lot of outdated incumbents who don't reflect me as a consumer, someone who is Gen Z millennial cusp, and it is a young professional that's constantly in a masculine energy at work and wants to come home, feel girly, feel feminine, be comfortable. And I live by myself. I want sleepwear that is for the female gaze, not for the male gaze. I don't want lingerie. I want to feel like a goddess, a fairy, a mermaid, going to sleep and waking up every morning. Is that so much to ask? Pause. Hi, this is Editing Karina. If you really liked the brand vision I described, and when you come home, you just want to escape to your fun, feminine fantasy land, and all of this is resonating with you, the Instagram handle is Drowsy Studios, DROWZI Studios. I'll link it in the bio, and I'll also include the link to the Shopify. I very much consider the first round of production to be very small batch, very intimate for my friends, family, and for you guys. If you've been following me for some time, you know my values, you know what I'm all about, and you can make sure that products that you're getting from Drowsy are manufactured sustainably, transparently. Okay, on to the rest of the pod. Anyways, that's my brand vision, but this whole tariff thing made me want to just kind of give up. But I was reading this book. Actually, let me go grab it. I was reading this book that I saw on TikTok that was full of pithy aphorisms, called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, a Lebanese-American risk analyst, statistician, and options trader. And he has a lot of really cool things to say about risk and probability, but the whole concept of anti-fragile is around the idea that just being resilient through periods of chaos and extreme change like America is going through right now isn't good enough, or at least isn't what you should strive for. The best scenario is to be anti-fragile. Anti-fragile means that throughout periods of chaos and disorder, you not only survive, but you end up thriving and doing even better than before. Sounds kind of crazy to talk about right now because things are like dystopian dumpster fire, but I feel like if somehow I'm able to actually start a business making sleepwear sustainably and source everything, manufacture everything within the US, then I would have really made it. When things are on the upswing, I'll be really good. If I manage to set this up and do well now, I'm good, I'm solid. So I'm giving it my best shot, and I feel like it's always been something I've wanted to lean into, try out again. I had a previous life making and selling Appa bucket hats, during COVID, if you know anything about my lore. And it was the most fun period of time in my life. I'm not even joking. I actually really enjoyed the time that I spent with my family and delving into my crafts and my hobbies during COVID. Obviously, hated the fact that the world was going through a pandemic. I digress. I have been feeling that that's my natural calling, is to build a fashion product that is reflective of my values, that I'm sure other people share, and fulfills a need emotionally, aesthetically, and functionally. So in my research for fabric sourcing and attempts to source fabric within the US, I learned a lot about what really goes into fashion. And even as someone who considered herself quite educated or interested and invested in learning about fashion, both as a culture and as a supply chain, I am surprised at how much I am learning and did not know before. And I think especially when we're talking about tariffs and being extra intentional about where you're spending your money now that it isn't going to stretch us far, something people should know is the difference between a fiber and a fabric. I guarantee you vast majority, probably 99% of people don't know this, and I also didn't know this, so don't feel bad about it. But usually when we think about the material that clothing is made of, we're thinking about fiber. When we talk about sustainable materials in fashion, we're usually talking about the fiber itself. We usually talk about how silk, cotton, and natural fibers are biodegradable. But where I think so much is lost in translation and where the bread and butter of sustainable fashion is when fiber gets turned into fabric. So what's the difference? Fiber is the base material that something is made of. Wool, cotton, silk, polyester. Fabric is the resulting bolt of cloth that is a product of the fiber being spun into yarns and then woven into that fabric. So for example, denim is a fabric that is made most of the time out of cotton. Jersey is a fabric that is created by knitting fibers. Sometimes it's polyester, sometimes it's cotton. Satin is a fabric that is made from weaving silk, usually, or polyester. You can even have cotton satin, and that's called cotton sateen. I think this is a very important piece of education that we should all try and get into our heads, because when we're talking about whether or not something is worth your time, it's not just about the fiber itself. There are so many differences between the way that cotton denim is produced versus cotton jersey or cotton satin. Denim uses a lot of water, a lot of chemicals, a lot of dyeing. And so while you think that something is the same sustainability level because it's made out of 100% cotton, the process in which it is turned into a bolt of fabric can encompass so many steps along the way where water, energy, resources, labor are inefficiently and unsustainably used. Transparently, I am just now scratching the surface on these differences between these different types of fabrics and how much of an environmental impact there is between these different types of fabrics. But I thought that would be a good FYI. And the more people are educated, the more people are thinking about sustainability in a more nuanced way than just, is it cotton or is it polyester? The more we can better judge whether or not a brand is really doing the right thing for you, whether or not they're actually producing quality materials that are worth the money you're paying for it. This is important to know now more than ever. If you weren't sustainably invested in this idea, at least now economically, you're probably more invested in this idea. As someone who's trying to build a fashion brand and also a fashion content creator, I did want to share a very cool influencer event. I usually don't say things like that I participated in this last week. I think it is really true that the universe does provide things for you right when you need them, and that what is meant for you will come to you, because right as I was having these thoughts about whether or not I should even continue pursuing a potential fashion venture, I was reached out to by Factory PR for an event with The Sack and Reprieve. It is really heartwarming, fulfilling, and cool to me when sustainable fashion initiatives, brands reach out to me as a content creator, because I feel so much alignment and I don't feel bad at all about promoting these brands with fast fashion content that I don't feel as much alignment about and frankly, don't care. Anyways, I digress. The SAC is a certified B Corp, which makes bags, shoes, a lot of beachwear out of crocheted material. Crocheting is done by craftswomen in Bali, and these women are oftentimes the breadwinners or sole providers of income for their families. So the SAC is the fashion brand who creates the bags and the shoes, and Reprieve is the producer of the fiber. Again, the difference between fabric and fiber. Reprieve produces the fiber that is used as part of the SAC's yarn for its crochet, and Reprieve is made in North Carolina, so in the US, and works with waste collection systems across the East Coast. So they'll collect your PET bottles and then turn them into fibers that can then be turned into yarn. Now, just because something has Reprieve doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% Reprieve. So Reprieve can be woven with other fibers in order to have your desired end product. I'm still doing some research into what end products are available through Reprieve and care instructions of those fabric types, because sometimes fabrics need to be dry cleaned, which kind of offsets how it was sustainably produced, because dry cleaning is very energy intensive and often involves chemicals as well. But I felt really honored to be reached out to by such a sustainably minded company. The designer Shoei, she was discussing with me, SAC considers its end of life, its recycling methods, labor practices. It's really cool to see fashion brands that are serious about sustainability. To mention, the bags are really stinking cute. I got a little phone holder, something that I don't already have, and I felt would be perfect because I've been going on more and more vacations to warm places, and I feel like this would be really useful. And I also got a pair of sandals coming in the mail, which is great. So really shout out to the brands that are doing the right thing, because there are some out there, and those are the brands that deserve your money. I also will say that I expect a good number of small businesses and brands that have relied on such a global supply chain. A good number won't survive. Anyways, I hope that today's podcast episode gave you something interesting to chew on and discuss with your friends. If you enjoyed today's deep dive on sustainable fashion, the impact of tariffs on the apparel industry, and my musings on starting a business throughout all this chaos, please give this podcast a rating and share it with a friend who you think might be interested. We'll yap again next time. Bye.